My name's Arpad Maksay, and I'm from Melbourne in Australia. I do a Japanese martial art called Kendo, which is basically, it's sword fighting. It's like Japanese fencing. And the reason I started Kendo was because I was born in 1976, and in 1977 George Lucas released the first of the Star Wars movies, and it was an instant hit, a blockbuster hit back then. And so as a little kid growing up, I watched Star Wars and loved Star Wars, and I wanted to become a Jedi. And to be a Jedi, I thought I should make a lightsaber. So my brother and I, we spent a lot of time trying to make a lightsaber. We came up with all of these different ways, and the funniest one was that we thought if we got a long, clear tube of plastic and filled it with blue or green minty gel toothpaste, we could have a blue Luke first iteration lightsaber that he inherits from Obi-Wan, or a green second iteration lightsaber that he inherits from, that he makes himself, right?
Did it work?
In Return of the Jedi, yeah? Remember that one? You remember that? Yeah.
Star Wars fan.
Yeah. So basically that was the funniest idea that we came. And anyway, after that, my father was for the local town newspaper, he was the film, what do you call it? The film critic. He would write articles about. So he used to go and see a lot of films for that, job that he did. So he took me to see a lot of Kurosawa films, and Kurosawa, Akira Akira Kurosawa is Japan's probably most famous director. So as a kid, I'd be running around the cinema. There'd be a big cinema, maybe one or two people, because the films weren't popular at the start because people didn't know about them. And I'd just be running and playing, and meanwhile on the screen behind me is all these, samurai battles. And so then I was like, instead of a lightsaber, I should make a katana. I'll get a katana, right? So I did all this research into a katana, and I tried to make, in Miss Thornton's metalcraft class, in year 8 or year 7, so first year of high school in 1989, I tried to make a katana in her metalcraft class, and to her credit, she allowed me to try and then failed. Because of course it's impossible, right? You can't. It's like one of the most difficult techniques that human beings have come up with, right? The Japanese sword is the best example of swordcraft in the world. To this day, it's still the same. And the technique is just amazing. I've seen it done before, and it's like there's so many steps, and it's so complicated, and it's so incredible. So I gave up on that, and then I discovered the end of that year, I discovered that there was a kendo club in my hometown of Ballarat, and so I instead got a bamboo sword, and I started doing kendo, and I've been doing kendo since then. So my view of sustainability is that in Star Wars, they talk about the Force. It's around you, it's inside you, it's everywhere, right? In the later series of Star Wars, they've really stuffed the concept up because they've started bringing genetics into it. So if you're a hybrid person, then you have the genetics to make you a Jedi, right? You can feel the Force. But they are doing something interesting with the new character, the girl, because she doesn't know her family, right? She's apparently from just like, poor people in the desert, right? But hopefully that stays that way, unless it turns out that she's actually the princess or something. That'll ruin it. Anyway, I digress. Coming back to the main point. So the Force, for me, is the platform for sustainability, right? So the Force in India, we call it prana. In Chinese, we call it chi. And in Japan, chi is ki, right? So it's a real thing. It exists. When you become aware of it, it's just there, it's all around you, right? So for me, sustainability is following that path and connecting deeply with the force, such that I am hopefully one day a person who can actually, have the kind of powers to connect the unconnected in ways that will save our planet.
Why are we so disconnected with the force?
Ironically, it's because of technology. So the more technology we've created, the further away from the force we have gotten. So the reason the world's oldest living culture, the Australian Aboriginals, stopped their technological development at a certain point was on purpose, right? The elders made a decision to stop technology, right? Other old cultures like Japan have made similar decisions too. There's a very interesting story that I can tell you about one day if we have time. So they stopped technology because they realised that the more technology you create, the further you get away from the force, right? So they wanted to be connected, and that's why Aboriginal spiritual practice is to do what we're doing now. And it's not complicated. There's no process, there's no book, there's no set rituals. There are those things too, but the basic entry-level one that you can do every day is really simple. You just take your shoes and socks off and you put your feet on the earth, and like Zilong was teaching us, you say thank you. And if you do that, and if you practice that spiritual practice in whatever way you do it, whether it's from this side or this side, it doesn't matter, you get more and more connected to the force.
Do you think it is possible, I've heard of this term, it's paleofuturism. Do you think it's possible to conceal high-tech vision with ancestral wisdoms?
Yeah, exactly, which is basically one of the strong themes in Star Wars, right? The relationships they have with 3CPO and R2-D2, they're like friends, right? Like in the most recent film when Luke sees R2 again, he wants to hug him, right? Like, does he hug him? I can't remember. But anyway, the point is that they love, their technology is actually so gotten to a point where they have, it's like the Astro Boy thing, right? The Japanese get this. There's a clue in Japan of how we can live with technology. So there's a lot that we can learn from this place. A critical concept of Japanese Budo, which is all the Japanese martial arts. And it's not just Japanese Budo, it's a lot of things, right? So in Latin America, it's that concept exists in your dance culture, right? In Brazil, like what are they called? What's the Brazilian martial art? Capoeira. Yeah, Capoeira also understands. So everyone, it's not like a unique concept or anything. Everyone knows it. So basically, what that concept is, it's Aiki. So Aiki means where you take your ki and you put it together with your partner's ki, and then you do something together, right? So for example, in dancing, you connect and then you dance. In kendo, you connect and then you fight. We are now doing the same thing, right? So right now we're connecting to the force because we are sharing the energy between us, and that also connects us into the wider. So, when you get in your car, we tend to call it mindfulness now. That's the new word for it. But basically what it is it's, you just actually concentrate when you do something.
Just be aware.
Yeah, exactly. The Aboriginal cultures would call it awareness, right? So the reason Aboriginal people probably, you can argue who's the best or whatever, but they're some of the best trackers in the world. People who, like if somebody gets lost, they can go and find them. They're, basically like indigenous Sherlock Holmes people, right? Basically they can just, So a really good tracker in Aboriginal culture has just, they're not looking, they're so far advanced in that art that they don't even need to look anymore. They just know. So they just see a slight little shift in the pattern and they go, oh, they're over there. And then you go over and the little baby's in the look, it's like magic, right? But it's just because their awareness is so broad that all of their senses, all of the different senses that we have are picking up little subtle changes in the Force at any time, just like Jedi Masters, right? So they can go, oh, something happened over there. And then you go, it's like magic, but it's not magic. It's continued practice. 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, 1 million, 20 million, 100 million, 1 billion. And then maybe you get there.
Maybe. Hopefully after 1 billion.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
That was
Well, Arpad,
really
thank you
useful.
very much.